Right, we're live. Welcome everybody to the latest episode of the Scholar Gypsies. I'm delighted today to have Patrick E Walsh on with us, and it's the second time I've interviewed Patrick. The first time being back in late January because he was doing some very interesting work on excess deaths, excess mortality, and was basing a lot of his work at that point with data coming out of RIP.ie. The reason I have him on today is that there was a very kind of curious release from the Central Statistics Office on October 4th, and it was basically the headline, or we'll say the nugget to take from the top of it was the RIP data is high quality and provides very close to real-time death and mortality statistics. So the CSO had been doing this. I had announced that they were experimenting with RIP.ie, but this really gives the seal of approval to that data, and also to work that people like Patrick have been doing for the last, I suppose, coming up in a year now, Patrick. So
that's right.
I suppose we might start there. Is where have you been in your journey in all this data, and what did you think when you saw that CSO publication coming out last week?
Well, thanks for having me on again, Jerry. I'm delighted to talk about this again. Well, I'll just give a quick thing. Yeah, we spoke at the end of January. I'll just give a quick review of where I went, what I took, the journey I took since then. I was on Twitter at that stage, trying to use that to get my stuff out there, and then it was going good, getting a lot of traction. I don't know whether people were reacting to it, and so I'm just going by views. It was very good, but I went on Substack then and started doing articles, because that's where I was more comfortable doing that stuff, longer pieces and more detailed. And I think, as you know yourself, Twitter had a row with Substack, and basically anything is shadow banned with Substack. So that I was only after starting. I think that was end of March, start of April, and at that stage I backed out of Twitter. I'm off it now for the last 4 or 5 months, because I didn't see any point in it, and I was actually wasting my own time flicking through stuff, just looking at nonsense. So that's why I came out of that, and I've concentrated on Substack ever since, and I've followed the CSO figures, the Eurostat figures, and RIP.ie figures. And I've done other stuff as well, looking at medical figures, which basically indicate, as far as I'm concerned, that there's something dodgy going on since 2021. So that's what I've concentrated on. And most of my stuff is coming out through Substack. I've done a lot of interviews with other people, and they put them out on their sites, and that's fine. I enjoy doing that. But I concentrate on my stuff on Substack.
Mm-hmm.
So just to come back to this release on last Wednesday, whenever it was, it's quite unbelievable in a sense. I mean, ordinary people looking at it will go, yeah, it's easy and exciting and accounted over something. But what you said is correct. They had, previous stuff talking about RIP.ie, they had said it was reliable to 99%. They had done extensive reviews on it from 2016 onwards to provide a basis for the Eurostat figures that they supply. But in this, the key finding on this, and they put it at the start of it, is RIP, or as they call it, online mortality figures, are reliable, and they're 12 to 24 months more timely than CSO figures. In other words, as the phrase you use, it's real-time mortality data, because most deaths are up there, I think they say, within 1.5 days of the death happening. So there is no doubt the CSO have doubled down on what they consider the reliability of RIP.ie data. And that's important, because they've said it before, and I think I've had further thoughts about, since I've spoke to you about this release since, and we can get into it.
Yeah.
But you saw that the first thing and the key finding is they explicitly say again, this data is reliable and timely, and that forms the basis for everything that follows on, and all the other things we say.
Well, you see, that was the first thing I thought of when I came across it myself towards the end of last week, was that there is almost a cottage industry of people like like yourself, that have really dived into RIP.ie, and there's websites now. I know of at least two Irish. I think it's Ireland's Excess Debts is one, and there's another one. But it almost seemed like the combination of all of the work that's been done by you, but especially you and Jimmy, and we'll say Jimmy Rhatigan and others that have been out there. It almost seemed like a response to that, because in a sense, in that all these people are doing all this work out here, and the CSO figures, as you say, they're 5 months out of date. Like they're 4 to 5 months lag on them, the quarterly statistics anyway. And I suppose one of the things that I noticed with it in the first few paragraphs is the CSO is saying that the general registry office, when somebody dies, you have 3 months to register the death. So that's one of their kind of explanations as to why there's a lag. But after 3 month period, the official method that they're getting statistics, only 82% of deaths are actually recorded at the 3 month point. I was wondering, did you have any thoughts on that?
Well, that is true. I mean, they're saying that, Jerry, and there's no point in disputing that, because if you compare RIP.ie figures with the registered deaths figures, there is differences. But the important thing is what they do is they release the quarterly figures 5 months in arrears, the registered deaths, and then I think 18 months after the end of a year, they will draw it all together, and they will say, like, say for the first quarter, they will tell you the registered deaths. Now that doesn't mean that people died in that period. They'll just say that could be registered deaths from before, again, back the previous time. But I think it's within 18 months or 20, the following October, 12 months. So that's 22 months after the end of a year. They will bring it all together, and they will tell you how many people actually died by date. So that's how far they're nearly 24 months behind what RIP are when they want. If you want to know what actually the people that actually died in a year. But I mean, you can only compare like with like, and if you're doing that the whole time, that's important. And there's no problem with that. I do analysis of the CSO figures, and at no point am I saying that that's the people that died in that year. All I'm saying is they're registered, and we're comparing like with like. And the same if you compare RIP figures, which is real-time data, you get the same thing. So, there's a lot of stuff thrown out there, like what you just said, and when people read it, they go, "Oh my God, you can't interpret any of this data because, like you just said, there's only 82% of deaths registered in the 3 month period." And the first thing people go is, "Well, where are the other 18%? Where did they turn up?" And it confuses people. But the important thing in all of this is you compare like with like. And that's what we're always doing. And the two websites you're talking about are irelandexcessdebts.com, do fantastic work, and ripcounties.ie. They more or less concentrate on the individual counties. And these people, I know them, and they're independent of me, but they do unbelievable work putting that stuff together.
Absolutely, because I know when I was looking at this a long, when I was down this rabbit hole, and I kind of tend to move from thing to from topic to topic in my writing, especially. But it's very appreciative that there are so many people like yourself. It's great to see on Substack, number one, but number two is that there's so many people, because I think when you were on with me, that triggered a few people. You had a call to arms kind of people around the country to do data for their own county, and I think at least one of those websites was as a result of that call to arms, where they started, people started building a county by county picture.
Jerry, the response I got after that video, and you put my email up, because I was hoping something like that would happen. And yes, the two websites I named were directly from people who got in touch with me, and I've spoken to them, and they inspired is the wrong word, because they were actually, the people involved were doing stuff anyway against all that was going on. But this gave them an idea. Yeah, I'll go out and I'll do it. And they took it further than I did, to be quite honest with you. And they're more technically minded than I am, and I have no problem with that. And they've inspired me to take it on to a different level as well. So that interview, I did 3 interviews around that time with yourself and with Stephen Delaney and with Gemma O'Doherty. They were all within a couple of weeks, and it just, a lot of people contacted me, wanted to do their own work for their own county, not to be published, but I'm sure they were talking to their friends, and I think it did make a difference. It made people more aware of that. They didn't have to stand back and think there's experts out there who do this for me. The method I had was very simple, as you remember. You just go into your county, you get the detail, and you tot them up. And people did that for themselves.
Yeah. Now, I suppose, getting back to the CSO release there from the fort, and I suppose to people that aren't aware, it's not. This isn't a scheduled CSO publication, like a quarterly death release or something like that. But what it was really is, like, it had some interesting stuff, and I suppose the first place to go is they did produce graphs on their own version of what excess mortality looks like based on the RIP data, and a couple of and their own sources as well, going back, because again, what we should say is the CSO release covers from, I think, October 2019 up to June 2023 on this release. So what was your analysis of what they produced in that, Patrick?
Well, what they produced, and again, I just want to stress it, anything here is based on RIP.ie figures, and they have doubled down. They stand over the RIP.ie figures. Now, in no part of this publication do they say in figures what the excess deaths are or provide a percentage. But they provide a graph at the end, and you've seen it, Jerry, and basically it looks like 3 snails crawling across a page. You could not interpret anything from it. But what I did is, and the idea behind the graph is they're trying to come up with a new way of calculating 3 basis period for excess deaths, and they were using 3 different methods, and the graph was the 3 lines with the 3 different methods, but each of them showed excess deaths. So I took the RIP.ie data, the actual figures, and I applied it to the 3 methods they were using, and I came up with the figures.
Okay.
Right. So you can, when I applied with the figures, I came up with what they were showing in the graph. Even though the graph shows excess deaths, there's no percentages. You can't really read it because it's shown, I think, either bi-monthly or quarterly. So things will obviously go up and down. But I applied it on a yearly basis, and for 2020, it doesn't matter. There's no point in us getting complicated and talking about the 3 different methods coming up. But for 2020, the 3 different methods come up with the same figure, 4.2% excess deaths, which is really next to nothing. Okay. Then for 2021, there was 3 different methods. The figure they come up with was excess deaths of between 11.8% and 13.7%. That's a massive jump. And for 2022, the figure is between 11.1% and 17.2%. Now, their figures are understated because, as far as I'm concerned, but leave that out of it. This is the CSO basically trying to come up with the lowest figure possible. And the lowest figure possible they can come up with for 2022 was 11.1%, and 17.2 is they're saying is the max, but it's probably 18 or 19. We were coming up on RIP.ie.
So why, in terms of what you'd say is what they're coming up with, how does your analysis of what they've done differ? And, like, we'll say for 2022, what percentage are you coming out with based on RIP.ie data for excess deaths?
We were coming up, but I think it was 18.4, Jerry.
Okay.
And the reason that our comparison is based on a 5 years up to 2019. Their highest figures based on 4 years from 2016 to 2019. So that makes a small difference.
Yes.
So and there's no, that's 18.4. It's only a small difference.
Now they've in the same publication, they came out with, they zoned in on a couple of spikes, and they came up again with this this terminology of people that died from COVID or of COVID kind of thing, had a COVID positive test before they died. So again, that was another interesting kind of line in this.
Yeah, we might talk about this for the end. About my reasoning. I was trying to come to a reason of where this publication came from. I know someone would say high up in the CSO said we've got to come out with something, but we can go further down the line. I think someone has gone rogue in the CSO and is putting stuff in there, because what you just said, they make that point specifically, and when they're talking about coming up with a new basis period for calculating excess debts, and they first of all they show that graph, and further down the line they say COVID debts include people who died with and of COVID. In other words, it's exaggerated. We all knew that all along, but they are saying it officially in this publication. And I know Rhatigan came out and he was actually proud of how they lied and increased all the. I remember that speech he made, and he was so proud, and he did that, and everyone was going, "You mean you lied to us?" And no, it didn't cost them a thought. But the CSO have doubled down here. They've said, yes, COVID deaths that they're including in their graphs include people who died with and of COVID. So that's important.
Well, that was the massive tool to coerce the public into kind of fear and keeping quiet. Was these COVID deaths that were presented as purely COVID, and what we're finding now is, there was no, any chat about, comorbidities or other reasons for people dying. And to be quite frank, I would love to. There's no stats in this, but I would love to find out what the stats for some of this stuff is on people that got COVID in a hospital environment that they were in for some other reason.
Jerry, that's a whole other area that people have done work on, and that's a scandal in itself. But if you, I don't, offhand, I can't remember what figures they were releasing for COVID deaths when all this was going on, but what the figures they are putting into their graphs here are from the HSPC, and their official COVID deaths. You can go onto their website, and they were doing them weekly up to a certain period. Then they started doing them monthly. So again, in interpreting these graphs, I went into the HSPC and got their actual figures. And I'd say from memory, these are a lot lower than what they were releasing in their daily things on RTE to scare people into getting vaccines and to lock down and all this sort of stuff. But that's a job for someone else to go back and look at.
Well, now you mentioned the big V word there. There's quite a lot of there's quite a lot of words in this release, but I went through it a couple of times. I didn't see the V word mentioned anywhere as a explanation for this. And I'm not saying anyone should, but I suppose it's inevitable that people, the vaccines have to be compared to the equation of questions being applied, but also one of the dives they do in this release is to have a look at the December 2022 and January, I think it was December 2022, that they pointed out a massive spike in that month, I think, or maybe it was January of this year, but one of those 2 months. And there was no real, there was plenty of mention again of COVID and stuff like that. But what was your analysis of that section?
Well, see, Jerry, you've read it the same as I have, and they never pin their figure. They never put anything up and say we are saying this. They use figures like broadly linked and closely aligned, and just before, like, they went a long stretch from. They grouped a period from July 21 to September 22. And they put two graphs together, one on top of the other, showing excess deaths and COVID deaths was only rippling along. Like, COVID deaths had stopped at that stage. And they tried to basically hint that if there was a small movement in the COVID deaths, that this was to explain the graph above with the excess deaths. Now, I did an analysis of the RIP deaths the excess deaths. I got the COVID deaths from the HSPC site, and I took them away, and I was left with a massive unexplained excess deaths, unexplained as far as they're concerned. Basically, some of them were over 20%, 16, 18, 90%. And they talk about those COVID deaths as if that explains the excess mortality. And they just leave it hanging there. They don't clarify anything. And people are looking at that graph and they're saying, oh yeah, the COVID deaths were going up a small bit. That might explain it. It in no way explains what went on from July 21 to September 22. And again, the point about that is the V rollout was from January 21 onwards. It peaked in July 21, where I think 90% of the adult population had got their primary dose, which was 2 or 1, depending on which one you were getting. But there's no, they're hinting that COVID might have filled the gap for the excess mortality. But there's no mention of this other thing that was going on as well.
Mm-hmm.
So that's important. Now, they come to, they make an even bigger step then. In December 22 and January 23, things were so bad. Varadkar had to get up in the Dáil and basically say, yes, there is excess deaths, and I need a report from the CMO. Of course, we never had anything about that ever since.
Mm-hmm.
But that shows it was happening, and it was so bad that they had to say it. Mm-hmm. And again, they make a point about the HSPC had, I think I'll read it. They said the HSPC, particularly around the peak in December 22, closely aligns with weekly reports with high levels of influenza and other respiratory viruses. Now, I'm sure that's correct. We have influenza, December, January, every month.
Mm-hmm.
But they're trying to say there that accounted for the excess deaths. That's scandalous, Jerry, because they picked 1 month where there might have been a bit of flu. And the excess deaths from November 22 continued until August and September 23 are massive every month, except for 1 month in February, mm-hmm. where so many people died in December, January. What you usually get is you get a lull the following month because people's deaths have been brought forward, the mm-hmm. older people. And that's the only time we've been down in February. The Eurostat figures will stand that up, and the Eurostat figures are based on RIP.ie, so they're the same thing. Mm-hmm. Now, they put up those graphs, and it hints at there's a bit of an influenza around, and that caused all this. They can't get away with that. To leave stuff hanging there like that, and people reading it, ordinary people reading that, saying, maybe there's nothing to worry about. I'm telling you, there's something to worry about, because they are ignoring the massive elephant from November 22 to August 23.
Mm-hmm. No, you're right. And even go back to September, September 21, September 21, and when you link it to where we were in the COVID journey at that point, the Omicron variant was coming in, and it was by their own accounts a much weakened virus. And we were at a stage where there was a lot of the population vaccinated by that stage. So Leo Varadkar has form on this, in terms of the excess death. But if you remember back to those times, they ramped up the pressure September, October, November, December was the high point of, we'll say, coercion, when the data was showing them that that particular variant wasn't even as strong as the seasonal flu. And the other point with it was the data was starting to show the vaccines weren't effective against that variant in any shape or form, because I think that's one of the and look, I'll accept all that's opinion, but the evidence of that was the removal of the vaccine passport. And I agree with you on the CSO of there possibly being some sort of renegade element within the CSO, because it's something I've said to myself a couple of times on different things, where my own analysis I think it was December 2021, I was looking at that they were trying to say unvaccinated people with COVID that were unvaccinated were clogging up the ICU beds. and it was actually a combination of the HSPC data that you're on about there, and the CSO who were doing weekly releases on COVID at that time. By putting them together, you could actually work out that they weren't factoring in nursing home beds into their analysis in terms of the nursing home cohort of people that were dying were 100% vaccinated, are very close to it, and who were not being transferred to hospitals to take an ICU bed. So it was kind of making the hospital sector and the unvaccinated look a lot worse, while leaving out that massive segment of data and deaths from the equation. So, but anyway, I'm gone on for a tangent there a little bit. But one of the things I wanted to chat to you, because I was kind of shocked by that 82% figure in terms of the fact is 3 months 3 months after a specific deaths, the general register officer still missing almost 20% of the deaths in an official way, but yes, they have this thing that RIP.ie data is highly accurate for the first year. After the first year, it more or less maps equally with the CSO's figures. But then at the end of the second year, there's like a drop off where there's a 5% differential. So what that would mean is we're sitting here today in October 2023, that death data for October 2021 would now start showing that was kind of tracking fairly well, suddenly finds this 5% gap at the end of 2 years, which they kind of explain as being possibly to do with coroner inquests and stuff like that. I think they have a figure of 2,400 inquests a year and no death certificates. What did you read of that, or did you make anything of it?
Jerry, I think that's just a red herring in the whole thing, because you have to remember RIP. They are saying, and they didn't say they used the figure 99% here. They used it in a previous release that 99 RIP was 99%. You won't have 100% of deaths in RIP.ie, and another thing is very few. You'll see very few immigrants or anything like that in RIP.ie. It's nearly a uniquely Irish thing. So there is a certain amount of deaths won't be in RIP.ie. But what's important here is, if RIP is correct, the rest of it is just a CSO catching up. And to talk about when they get to a certain point, well, some coroner's reports, if someone died and there's a coroner report being waited on an inquest, that death is in RIP.ie, or 99% of them are. So that's the data. The rest of it is just the CSO trying to, and I understand they have to do it, but you might be confusing things a little bit there, Jerry. But say the 3 months to January to March, they'll say 82% of those deaths will be registered in the 3 months. But you'll have to remember is deaths from the previous quarter will have been registered. In other words, they'll have come in. So it's not as if there's a shortage of deaths down the line. There's always a role in canopy going along, conveyor belt. Say the deaths from October, November, December 22 that are late coming in, they will come in the first quarter. So if there was no big movement in dying, this would be to be regular. There wouldn't be any big spikes or anything like that. It's not as if they're waiting for 18% of deaths to come in at one particular time to even out the flow. Yeah, you have to remember that.
No, but I guess that explains why it's taken them 5 months to release data on the GRO stuff. Why there's that time lag, we'll say.
Because what they do quarterly is they release the register deaths. Now, that's a specific what was registered in that period. But like I said, 22 months after the end of a year, they will tell you the people that actually died in that year, and that comes from all the subsequent releases or deaths being registered late, and they can see the date the person died from the register, and then they can bring it all together. Yeah, so that's how that works. But all of that will come back to whatever RIP.ie's figure for the deaths published in that year, it'll agree to within 1%.
Mm-hmm. No, no, that's good. I suppose another area they delved into here, and it's one we should really talk a lot more about because it's linked to more things than excess mortality, and that is the age analysis of the data, if you like. One sec, Patrick, I have a dog barking here.
Yeah, all right, no problem.
Whoa.
Sorry, I just want to get my sheet there, Jerry, okay?
Yeah. Yeah, so Patrick, I suppose one thing I want to talk to you about is basically an age analysis of the data. The CSO jump into it a bit, and I suppose it's something we need to be cognizant of in a country where we have to say that the average age of the population has risen quite spectacularly over the last 5 or 6 years, and will do in the future. So I was just doing a quick look at it last night, and on just the bold figures, in 1993, 400,000 people over the age of 65 died, and in 2013, that figure was 800, or 23. That figure jumps to kind of nearly 800,000. So that's a doubling of kind of the mortality statistics for the over 65 in a country where the demographics are changing rapidly. How do you factor in that stuff, and as in terms of kind of predicting out what might happen? Because I know RIP. I suppose one of the drawbacks at RIP.ie is it's impossible to get kind of the age categories of deaths from it.
Yeah, that's not available for RIP.ie, and there's no point in pretending it is. There's, again, when we start talking on this, Jerry, we're not going to read out what that publication says, but they don't say the excess mortality is caused by the aging population. They hint at stuff. Mm-hmm. They put out statistics like that. And the first one I want to, and first of all, I do agree. I mean, if the population is getting older, there will be an increase in the absolute deaths. But there's a few things that we need to, before we get into detail. They keep saying the age 65. Okay? Mm-hmm. That is deliberate. That is programming. That is programming people to think 65 is an age for people to be expecting to be dying. And they keep putting it out in every publication. The amount of people over 65 is getting bigger. I mean, so what? The Irish life expectancy is 83, 84 for women, 82 for men. Okay, that's a massive gap from 65 to 83. So they're pre-programming people to think, oh, the Irish population is getting so old that explains the excess mortality. So that's the first point we want to nail. You've got this age 65. That's you can't just put that out there and expect people to say that's okay for the dying. Now, you saw one of the graphs they did in this release. They put down two graphs together. They showed the age of people going up, the figures you just talked about, the age of people going up, and they had a big graph going up like that, and they showed the amount of people age 65 or over. Again, focused on the age 65. And they put a graph underneath it where they had projections for mortality, which they produced just after the 2016 census. In other words, they had the demographic figures. I presume they used actuarial tables, and they produced mortality estimates for the next 13 years. And I presume they didn't just pull them from behind the rear hole, that they did it statistically the way they should do it. Now, you've seen, I've compared their projections, they have the figures on it, to the RIP data. Now, for 2017, 18, 19, and 20, they were within, I think it was it 4%? Their projections were very close. And I'm just trying to see now. Yeah. So the highest they were out was in 2018, was 4.4%, which was about 1,300 deaths out of 31,000. Then we get to 2021, and remember, this is up-to-date demographic data about 65-year-olds and older, and 75-year-olds and 85-year-olds. So they knew they would know this amount, and in a year's time, obviously, they'll be a year older. So it's all built into it. Their projections for 2021 were 11.4% out. They went from being approximately 3.8% out in them the next 4 years to jump to 11.4% out. And in 2022, they're 13.1% out. And if the figures for 2023 keep going the way they are, they're going to be about 12.2% out again.
Mm-hmm.
So again, the big V word is not mentioned in 2020. Something happened in 2021 to throw their projections completely out.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I did on a previous Substack, I took, you can get the deaths over 65 onwards, and I took them and I compared them to the population per census. Now, we had a population per census in 2016 for the age 65 over, and we had the figure from 2022, and I took a linear line in between, and I matched the deaths. Now, this is very interesting. From 2016, which was a census figure, down to 2019, although there was 4 years, 2 of the years, even though the population are getting older, the absolute deaths, even the number of deaths fell, even though the population was getting older. 2 of the years they went up a small bit, but in those 4 years, the deaths per thousand of that population group fell. Okay, fell significantly from 39.33 in my figures to 35.88.
Thousand people.
That's per thousand.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
so that's a significant fall. Then in 2020, when we had the pandemic and a lot of strange stuff going on in nursing homes and in hospitals with the older age group, it turns around. It rises a small bit. 2021, that rise continues again a small bit, and 2022, it's gone up again.
Yeah.
So it was falling all along, and around 2021, something happened. 2020, 2021, something happened. Now, in 2020, we had a lot of people dying in the older age group. We won't go into what reason. They'll say it was COVID.
Well, we had that. Well, specifically, we had that in the March, April massive spike. We're really talking about maybe 1 or 2 months there where, any data sources I've seen, there was some sort of a spike in that, trigger month of the pandemic. So I don't know, we can only surmise, we can only surmise on some of that stuff, especially some of the stuff that was going on in the nursing homes, which again, we're not 100% certain on. I suppose the only thing I would say, and some of these questions are kind of playing devil's advocate in a sense, But, I suppose one of the things you might say, or maybe you mightn't say, I would put it to you, is that, 2021 and possibly 2022. 2022 was a census year. 2021 would have been the last full year before the census. So there may be, if there were population shifts in 21, 22, they mightn't. It mightn't be. They'd be the weakest months of any projections on the basis of that.
Well, yeah, if you're taking a linear line, but
go on.
That's the only way. I mean, there's no other way of doing
it. Yeah.
But you have to remember. I know our population has gone up in that time, but we don't have people emigrating to Ireland of that age group. These people have got older in that time from 2016. There's no people have moved in. There's no big influx of outsiders from that age group. So any population changes, it's just the people getting older and dying in that group. It's not people moving in and making that group way bigger. So that's all I'd say about that. But again, you are right. I mean, I took a linear line. There's no way of knowing when you get to 21, 22, had it gone up significantly before that or after that.
But no, we do know there was virtually no movement of people 2020 and 2020. Well, especially 2020. So there was no significant movements of people in that, that 18 months anyway. So that's, the flip side of it.
Yeah, there was another, I think, and I think I sent it to you there the other day, Jerry, and I just did a quick thing. Again, I mean, these are only, well, it's not a spot check. I mean, these are, I took official registered deaths. You can get the breakdown by age group from the CSO, but again, they're registered deaths, and I took the two, what I call the heaviest dying months for the elderly from October in 1 year to the end of March in the other year. And I did a quick going from 2016 to the first quarter of 2023. And again, this is interesting because this age group is getting older over this 4 year period, 6 year period. So you think it would be fairly closely along the line. Now, we got to, I'd call the 4 pre-COVID years up to March 2020. For the 75 to 84-year-old age group. Now, I will not talk about the 65 to 75-year-olds. As far as I'm concerned, those people shouldn't be dying. And of course they will die, but they are not, no way should they be an excuse for the excess mortality that's going on. So I looked at 75 to 84-year-olds. And 2 of those 4 years, there was no real movement in the increase of the deaths, even though these people are getting older. And the biggest swing, it was 2.9% between year on year. Now, we get to the 21-22 period, and there's a 14.5% increase, okay, compared to the pre-COVID years. And in 22-23, 18.8%.
Yeah.
Now, they're massive jumps. Now, I know if people are getting older, they're more likely to
No.
die. That's valid. But to increase that much compared to the pre-COVID years, when you're only getting year on year 3% maybe, we're up at 18.8% when you look at that 6 months for 22-23. They're massive figures. And if you look at the 85-year-olds plus, it's the same sort of figures.
Could you give us those figures again? Just run them over again for those two, for that cohort.
Okay, we look at the 75 to 84-year-old age group, and we're talking about registered deaths.
Yeah. So this is now, CSO official data.
CSO official data, and I'm comparing the worst months. I'm talking about from October in 1 year to the following March.
And let's just remind people, especially in 2021, we were in a full lockdown situation there for a lot of, like, especially November and December. I remember, were brought in. So that was basically, because I'm just pointing that out because they're pointing to COVID all the time, but like the end of November, all of December was a heavy lockdown of 2022.
Yeah,
half of everybody being vaccinated. Go on.
Right. Well, I looked at 4 years prior to where it stopped in March 2020. Okay, just before the pandemic started, and the biggest, that's 4 years. The biggest year-on-year increase was only 132 deaths of approximately 4,800, which is next to nothing. And the biggest year-on-year, that was about 2.9%. So that's the biggest in those 4 years in that age group, 75 to 84. Okay, and 2 of the years the deaths actually went down. Like in 2019, 2020 was below 2017, 2018. Now, to be fair, 2018 January was a really bad flu season, and a lot of people did die. But now we've gone from that. We've had 3 periods since then. The 2021 period, January, around that period, the winter 2021, there was a 7.6% increase, which is not a massive change. I wouldn't say too much about that. But you go to 21-22, we're up at 14.5% increase. And the same thing for 22-23, we're at 18.8% increase. Now, they are massive jumps.
Especially that last one, Patrick. So based on what you're saying, there's like the 21-22 period,
it doubled about.
Yeah. So like you can kind of like the 22-23 period, we're fully out of lockdowns for a good while, where the population has been vaccinated a few times. The few different courses of vaccination have rolled out. So that that spike should be worrying somebody.
Well, there's that is 6 times the pre-COVID, the 4 periods pre-COVID. And the biggest year-on increase in those 4 years was 2.9% of that age group. In 22-23, we're at 18.8%. That's over 6 times. Now, it will be higher, of course, because the age group was 2 or 3 years older. But my God, that
No. It's like, yeah, no. I'm just bringing up the age analysis because it's, you can see these people are starting to take this when the CSO is coming out with stuff like this. It's almost like you can see that it's almost like the wave's going to break at some point in the next few months, and
yeah.
maybe the CSO are putting their, I don't know, ducks in a row in a sense in terms of some of this stuff. But you know what, where do you think we're at in the whole, if we take the excess deaths overview, and you've been working on it for over a year, where are we sitting here today in it, in terms of what it looks like?
I think the last 4, 5, 6 weeks has seen more movement. Leave aside the Vradker double flip from February to July, and he lied in the Dáil. Just leave that out of it. That's them playing their mind games, whatever they're doing. But in the last 4 or 5 weeks, I did a Substack. Celine O'Donovan contacted me. You know Celine, and she'd contacted a few TDs, basically asking for an explanation. And my previous Substack was on a reply she got, and I think she got 3 of them. And basically, they're cut and paste jobs where the CSO or some department is putting together, and it's basically all the same stuff with a lot of the guff that was in that release from the CSO about the age profile. And again, they never say anything definitively to say this explains this or this explains that. They just put stuff out there. So that was a big step. That was about 2 or 3 weeks ago. Celine got in touch with me with that reply, and I put something together on that. Now, I don't really send my stuff to politicians.
But
Yeah,
in a
but
sense, just before you move on there, what Celine did there, or what the CSO did, or whoever prepared that data for those politicians, that they're like almost giving them talking points to deal with the public.
yeah,
And
exactly.
all right, okay.
And they don't. Again, they never say anything definitively. They throw stuff out there about influenza, about in aging, and a lot of it is true, Jerry. I mean, the British profile of population is getting bigger, but they leave it hanging there as if that explains the excess mortality. Okay, now that stuff. Celine got those three. I think she got 3 replies. Definitely got 2, and basically the same cut and paste jobs. There was another individual who every Substack I did about excess deaths sent him to about 200 plus European and Irish politicians, and in all that time, he keeps in touch with me. He never got a reply. No one said that to him. They were being opened and read. I know that you can know that from Substack, but no one ever replied to him. A week after Celine got her reply, a county councillor came forward and saying very interesting what you've seen and looking to for more information on it. So things are stirring. Then you have what you brought my attention to, this CSO publication. This came out as well. It's all in the last 4, 5, 6 weeks. On one level, this is, excuse the language, arse covering. They know this dam is breaking, and there's no covering it up. Leave the politicians aside. You have official Ireland trying to cover their arses. That's what's happening. And I'm a bit like you. I met, after I spoke to you the other day, and I met one of the people involved in one of the websites. I hadn't met him before, but we were in touch for a long time, and we were having a good talk. And while we were talking, it came into my head: has someone gone rogue in the CSO? Because this confirms all the RIP.ie data. It confirms everything we're saying about Eurostat. It confirms all that stuff. And not only did that, I'd never seen those projection figures that they had made based on up-to-date demographic data in 2016. And that basically just gave us something to say, well, okay, the population is getting older, but you've taken it into account here, and we're still getting excess deaths from 2021 onward. And there's one other thing on that I just don't want to forget about the population group. And this is very interesting too. The Society of Irish Actuaries were very quiet on all this, had blogs going online, and they're still there if you go in for 20 and 21, analysing the figures going along. And again, they verify the RIP.ie data. And they were blogging saying that there was no real excess deaths in 2020. It's very small figures. But when they got to 2021, and they decided they'd have to build in the demographic trends as well. And presumably their actuaries, they knew what they were doing.
Mm-hmm.
They were getting 10 point something percent excess deaths for 2021 that they weren't seeing in 2020.
Mm-hmm.
And what's even more interesting, that blog stopped.
Wow.
Okay, or I can't get it ever since.
All right.
And it's like, surely the actuaries didn't lose interest in people
Well,
dying.
look, you're talking about you're talking about the smartest mathematical people in the fucking country.
Now to be fair, now I just be careful here. Now it wasn't. It was a
I
blog.
know.
It was a blog on their site. It wasn't the official release from them, but it was. They were.
Well,
It was there.
they wouldn't have put like
Yeah.
they wouldn't like that's even That's even more proof of it, because they would not put a blog on their site if given the eyes, the type of eyes that are going to be on that blog are probably themselves, like, or people in their profession. So no, I just wanted to rattle through. Thanks for doing for all that on the kind of the age analysis and stuff. And because it is an area, because I'm always kind of trying to look as to where they're going to come at you, where they're going to come at people, and stuff like that. So it was great to go through that. Just to go through that there for a few minutes.
See, Jerry, it's very important that they are. I mean, that's the truth. They are true in what they're saying, but it does not count for all of the excess mortality. And they're trying to say it does. No, sorry, they're not. They're not even saying that. They're leaving it hanging there.
Yeah, and that's what they do.
People fill in the gaps.
Yeah, that's what they do. It's like saying, it's like when you say, is it, oh, he died of COVID, or did he die with COVID?
Yeah,
kind of thing, and they leave it hanging there. Well, he died from COVID. Well, actually, no, he had 3 arteries blocked and was on the way out and got COVID. Patrick, I suppose, look at that. There's most of the roundup of that publication. We've gone through it there. I just want to ask you a question, a separate kind of issue, and just on yourself. How have you found the last, the last 9 or 10 minutes? Because as I understand it, you're like myself. I'm not sure if it was the same reason, but you've stood back from your job as an accountant, and you're kind of you're passionately pursuing excess debts and a range of other areas. But I get the sense that you're, the statistical analysis and stuff like that really is something you enjoy, if you like, or you like pursuing.
Yeah, I do. I finished my job back in July. Didn't fall out or anything. I was working with great people, and I had my mortgage clear. I don't have a load of money to never work again. I will at some stage have to go back and do something 2 or 3 days a week. But I have my health, Jerry, and I have no interest in accumulating money or anything like that. So I said, I always had an interest in writing, but this following this stuff since last November, I just can't. I can't let go of it. Okay, I mean, even when you contacted me last week, I decided it's been really hectic for the last few months since I've stopped, and I just keep when I get something in my head, I can't let it go until I've finished it. And I was going to take a break, and then this came up, and this, to me, that publication you brought to my attention is the most sensational thing in inverted commas that has come out in this whole thing. They've admitted RIP.ie, and consequent to that, the excess deaths. So I've got this thing, and I just, it's got a grip on me, and I can't let it go. And I am an accountant, a qualified accountant, but I'm not an actuary. I'm not a statistician, but I look at figures, and I think people shouldn't be put off by that they're not an accountant. You should ask. The most important phrase in my learning life has been, I don't know. Mm-hmm. And if I see something in figures, I say to myself, I don't know, and I will ask, please explain to me why that is. And that's what I'm doing with this. I'm noticing anomalies, big jumps in figures. And yes, I do. I keep going back to 2021, and I have pinned my colours to the mast that I do think vaccine damage has caused 50 to 6% of these deaths. Suicides have gone through the roof, which is lockdown policies bearing down on people. So I won't say addicted to this thing, but I'm hooked in, and I can't let it go. And I'm out there publicly.
How does that feel? How does it feel to be, from when I interviewed you first, and you were working with Jimmy, and I had a great conversation with Jimmy about 2 weeks ago on the phone, and I hadn't heard from him in a long time. But how has that been out in the public? Like, with the Substack and stuff like that, and doing interviews like this, and like, yourself, people kind of, the circles you start moving in, people kind of know who you are and stuff like that. How have you found that?
To be honest with you, I enjoy it, Jerry. I mean, it's not right pretending I don't, but it's there is a certain amount of the echo chamber, an echo chamber to it, because people do get in touch with me, and I've traveled the country. I have a camper van, and I don't go specifically to meet people, but I end up meeting a lot of people, and they email me, say, listen, if you're down my way, will you meet up? And I'll get in touch with them, and I'll go down and spend a couple of hours with them. And I'm meeting great people who I have a connection with, and there is a certain, but we're all in the same echo chamber, so I'm wary of that. But
Yeah.
I'm making great friends, and I love doing it. And it's like, even the guy I met the other day, we'd only emailed before previously, and WhatsApped, and we sat down and had a cup of coffee, and it was late. We spoke for about an hour and a half, and we could be there still talking about stuff, not just the COVID stuff, not just the scandemic, not all, just you make a connection to people, because I think there has been a dividing line gone down. It's invisible, that people who bought into the nonsense, and I still can't see it or admit that it was nonsense, they just can't connect to those of us on the other side. It's not that we are not going to try and talk to them. I think they need to admit to themselves, I got it wrong. And there's no one looking for apologies or anything like that. But I see it with other people around who I know would have bought into it all along, and I can still talk to them, and there's no problem. And we're not going to fall out with people. But the people who know where we are in this world at the moment, and the war we're fighting, there's an enthusiasm in them. There's a this person I met the other day, he was doing stuff long before I was. And he's in a position there, he has to keep it quiet about who he is and whatever. But this is going on 3.5 years, and this person, his enthusiasm hasn't waned one bit of it. In fact, it's even stronger, about to get out there and get people awake and to warn people about what's going on.
Yeah, no, I agree with you in the dangers of the echo chamber. I've deleted my own Twitter account as well. Now I have one that I just pop in and out to, but I know when I had a sizable one maybe 5 months ago, and I just I thought I need to get away from it, because it is kind of it can get a bit echoey, and you can kind of lose your objectivity a little bit, because you're drawn to the most sensationalist nonsense on the other side, and the danger is you start kind of becoming that yourself, like to fight back. And but what I would say is, I do think our government, and this is one of the problems with it, is almost running the country from how people are reacting on Twitter to things, and social media and other social media. And I think it's I genuinely believe it's affected them as people and the way they think. So that's a bit of an aside, but
yeah, I've been looking enough, and I had to get out of it, Jerry, because what you say is correct. You do get drawn into the whatever things, but I was actually wasting my personal time on it, flicking through stuff. So I said I got to stop. But I have the best of both worlds, because I have people take my stuff and put it up, to take snapshots of it and put it up. And like, so Ashley Loughlin does it a fair few times, and she is a very, her site is going non-stop on Telegram and Twitter, and she's getting, one of the things, she took my figures one time a month or two ago, and I got 120,000 or something views, which I think that's fairly big for Ireland for what's gone out there. So I get the best of both worlds. I don't have to wonder about running it or taking the abuse that comes with it, and like, that does get into your head.
Well, it does, but like people like Ashley are very, like, that's one of the many qualities of people like that is they just plow ahead. It doesn't, they're and we need people like that to do that. There's 4 or 5 of them you'd see on Twitter that they're relentlessly putting information out, and obviously taking I'm sure, I don't know, but I assume taking an awful lot of hits in the opposite direction. But one of the things I think I like about yourself, and especially might ask you just in the end about Jimmy, but is there's a little ecosystem of statisticians, kind of almost a cottage industry of people that are looking into this stuff now. And I agree with you. I know one of the guys that set up one of those sites, and have met him a few times. Their enthusiasm for this, it knows no bounds.
Jerry, and I know the guy you're talking about, and I met him as well. And I met one of the other fellas the other day. There's one other guy which I haven't met. These people are, first of all, their enthusiasm never wanes. If anything, it gets more stronger. And I see that in myself. And there's other people out there just doing it for themselves and keeping stats, and that's okay too. That's important, because these people are talking to other people, and if they're producing their own figures, they can speak from personal knowledge. And I try to say that in anything I put up. I always try to put links up so people go check my stuff. And I say, do your own research. I'm only a guide into what I think, and I'm not going to lie to you. Okay, I'm trying to get everything factually correct, but I can make mistakes. Do your own research, follow it up. But these people, Jerry, these people are going to be the saving of Ireland. Not just in the excess category. I'm talking people who've come forward and taken a chance on their convictions in all these matters that are going on in our country at the moment. Whether we won't mention the others. We're talking about one in particular at the moment. But I meet these people, and they're looking for no personal, like none of those other people are in public, and they don't want to be. I'm out there not because I wanted to be. I was given a choice at the start. I had basically, when I contacted Jimmy Rhatigan, a small radio station got in touch and asked me to go on talk about it, and I said no. I didn't want to be involved. And Jimmy basically said to me, listen, if you don't back this up, what chances there's, if you won't back up your own things, how can anyone do it? So I made a decision, and it's gone from there. And I'm here now, whether it's for good or bad, we'll see down the line. But I don't have any regrets. I said that to you before. It's been life-changing, and on a personal basis. And I've no regrets. I wouldn't have, if I could go back, would I keep anonymity? No, I don't think so. Sometimes you need to put a face on this thing, and face.
And we should maybe ask this as a final question. We're just tipped over the hour there, but it always seemed to me the combination of you and Jimmy's platform, the Kilkenny. Let me get this: Kilkenny Free Press,
KilkennyPress.ie.
KilkennyPress.ie, and very much worth going taking a look at for anyone watching. Is that the combination of you coming from the background you did, and I think it was, even though you're saying you're not an actuary, I think it was important you were an accountant. Whether that's right or wrong, but I do think that was important.
Yeah.
And I think it was important that Jimmy was a newspaper man of the old school variety.
I think it was vital. Yeah.
Yeah. Because the combination in the beginning, well, you were definitely more than a sum of your individual parts, is the way I might say that. But how is Jimmy keeping? Is his enthusiasm still going strong?
I was in with him last week. There was a group conference got together, and someone gave a talk and video stuff. Yeah, Jimmy's in great form. He always is. He did a few months back. He did a very strong op-ed on the whole mainstream media and local government, and really strong stuff. Like, Kilkenny's a small place, and Jimmy has no fear whatsoever, and he would never be bound by anyone, and they know that. And in a certain sense, someone like Jimmy is a more of a danger to them than me, because he has no fear whatsoever. And like, a lot of my stuff is national now, so it wouldn't be particular to KilkennyPress.ie. But Jimmy Jimmy does put stuff out there, and the odd time I will do stuff on Kilkenny local deaths and sudden deaths that I'd done a lot of before. But Jimmy hasn't rolled back at all. If anything, like he organised that talk in his own house last week to get a few of us together. So Jimmy is still ploughing ahead, and a great man.
Now, before we go, Patrick, and I'm the world's worst at doing this, but you should maybe promote. Just tell us your Substack address there, just to anyone watching. I'll put links to it in the
well, it's called Letters from Desolation Row, and I think the address is Patrick E Walsh substack.com. Is it?
I think it's patrickewelch.substack.com.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, and it's called Letters from Desolation Row, because there might be another one. I wasn't sure what I was doing when I was setting it up, and there might be one under Patrick E Walsh as well. But it's Letters from Desolation Row is my Substack, and I thought I'd only be putting out stuff once or twice a month. It never slows down, because there's stuff coming out. The CSO releases stuff, or the hospital waiting list, which I do a lot of work on, and ambulance call outs and stuff like that. And again, these are all, I call these canaries in the mine. None of them are definitive, but they all seem to focus back on 2021. Something changed, and so I do a lot of work on that. And yeah, and when I started, I thought I'd be writing about a bit of sport and stuff as well. I just don't get the time.
No.
So,
right. So listen, Patrick, we might leave it at that. I just want to thanks for taking the time to do the interview with me and go through that CSO release and the date as well. It was great to get it and great to get your time. So, just wish you best of luck in the future, and I'm sure we'll be seeing you shortly as well. So, thanks very much.
Thanks a lot, Jerry.
No,
talk soon.
Bye. Just end the recording.